Hello, welcome to the episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horwitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content, the website, where you can find everything, dsmsports.net, and the podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. A little bit something different today for you all. I was away this past week for a couple days in Denver at the Gondola Sports Summit, bringing together just some of the top pros in social media, sports, content, creative, analytics. I was there representing Greenfly, and it was so great to see a lot of former podcast guests and just great friends and colleagues and peers and people that I look up to and learning from them. So I wanted to take a moment for this week's episode to just talk through some of the main insights and things that I picked up. This is by no means meant to be an exhaustive summary of every single panel. I will try to go through and pick out a few insights from conversations that hopefully are applicable to you all, or at least stuff that stuck with me, and I will take with me as lessons and actionable, pragmatic insights to take away from some of these great conversations that were had by experts, moderated very well on stage, and just a tremendous event put together. This is the second now annual Gondola Sports Summit put together by the folks at Gondola. Shout out to Jared Kleinstein and for the folks at Fresh Tape. Nick Cicero did a great job with it as well. So without further ado, and if you don't want to listen to me talk or watch me talk for however long this is going to be, you can always just put this YouTube link into ChatGPT and ask for a summary. I'm also going to be posting a write-up on LinkedIn where a lot of these thoughts are summarized as well. So you have your choice to hopefully allow me to share what I learned with you. That's what this podcast is all about. Is I get to have these great conversations and learn from a lot of people, and my hope is that I just you get to learn along with me. Because I get to learn from experts, and I'm no expert myself. So jumping right in, we're gonna go not go quite in order of the conference, but a little bit. We're gonna start off with the first panel of the conference was about Reddit. Reddit is something that I've taken an interest in recently. You're really becoming not a power user by any means, but have been there as a brand, been there as a user, have commented, posted, had some stuff go viral with millions of views on posts and tons of engagement. I've also tried the ads platform, so it was interesting to hear about Reddit from the sports perspective. A leader on the sports partnerships team at Reddit, Christine Wickstead, was joined on stage by MLB's Vice President of Social Media Innovation, Cam Gadari, and they talked a lot about Reddit. Of course, it's something that we don't necessarily think of with the big players in social media and sports, where you're stuck in a whatever TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, maybe Snapchat kind of world. And it was interesting to hear about Reddit. So, without further ado, the some of the key takeaways from that panel. First off, Reddit, if you know it, it is a text first platform primarily. It's about the conversations. Kind of what Threads is trying to do. That doesn't mean that photos and videos have no place on there. It's about how can the photos and videos start a conversation. And so, as a team or a league or a brand or whatever, how can you add something valuable to a subreddit? Now, everyone on stage cautioned, and as many of you may know, Reddit is a place where brands are snuffed out and are usually not welcome, but they can be if you're providing value. So what does that mean? That might mean posting unique highlights or unique camera angles, which MLB talked about a little bit with some of the stuff that you won't get elsewhere, and how can that also drive some engagement there. Also, a really interesting point about niching down. Reddit is extremely interest based, interest graph. It's not really a social platform, meaning that like most people are not on there as themselves. You're not going to find your friends on there. You're going to find your friend might have a handle. And so it's really leaning into the interest graph. And that means that the subreddits are very much around niche interests. So MLB gave the example about how they've found a little bit of success on the weather subreddit. MLB, of course, you see tons of good photos of really cool looking skies and great weather, whether it's storms or lightning or just sunsets. And so MLB has found they can post a bit on the weather subreddit. That opens up such an opportunity here to think about what are those other stories or content that you can share, the stories you can tell that would appeal to a very niche or interest driven audience. We're seeing some of non-sports stuff or maybe outside the box thinking can really do well on the feeds of TikTok, for example, where all of a sudden your groundskeeper can you can talk to your groundskeeper about what it's like to maintain a field for an NFL stadium or an MLB ballpark, and that can go viral because people are interested in that kind of stuff, and especially people that are interested in whatever landscaping or lawn care or just some of the ins and outs of sports. And so maybe you find the landscaping subreddit. I'll have a groundskeeper, talk about or share some of the behind the scenes of what it's like to maintain these fields for, for a sports league or a sports team or a sports venue. So that certainly that niching down was an interesting, talk track for sure. AMAs, Ask Me Anything, as expected, continue to be a very big part of Reddit and where MLB's had some good success, and which really makes sense for them. They have MLB is very I don't want to say it's not national because of course it is. We all watch the World Series and All-Star Game, Home Run Derby, and some of the big names out there, of course, as well. But the local fans are very interested in their team, and so MLB has seen success with is having the team specific beat writers do an AMA on the team subreddit. So I'm a Padres fan. I can go on the San Diego Padres subreddit and hear from AJ Casabell, who's the Padres beat writer for MLB's website and app and whatnot. And so it's a really good opportunity to think about how can you super serve your audience. Obviously MLB coming at it from the league standpoint, but just a good example of just using that AMA product. Reddit also talked about how they continue to invest in that product and make it better. That was something that their representative on stage talked about from a product development perspective, making the Reddit AMA, whether it's through scheduling, moderation, or live interaction within an AMA. Certainly something that and video responses or video questions. So it continues to be something that if you have not tried it out or played around with an AMA, you do it with a broadcaster, do it with alumnus, do it with an athlete, and get the feel for it, and you will see that you really are super serving some of your biggest fans. It's similar to back in the day we used to do Twitter Q&As quite a bit. That's kind of fallen out a little bit. You don't see that quite as often anymore, but Reddit AMAs can give that sort of really deep engagement, and then of course you can repurpose some of those responses elsewhere as well on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever it might be. Also, a cool thing about Reddit is that as this was brought up on stage as well, it's not something that you need to post every day. The algorithm's not gonna, knock you down if you're not posting a ton. Whereas that might be the case on a Twitter or a YouTube or not really Twitter, but a TikTok, for example, or an Instagram Reels. But on Reddit, it's if something gets a lot of engagement, gets a lot of upvotes, it will be seen. And so you can go days, weeks even without posting on Reddit until you have something that is worthwhile. So don't feel the pressure that you have to program Reddit on a regular cadence. But when you have the right opportunity or you're planning something specific, get it out there because it's it can do well if you have the right bit of value that you're adding to a given subreddit. Also, again, we're gonna go back to the fact that consumers are a little bit skeptical of brands interacting. So you can work through moderators if you're not able to work through the mods of given subreddit. Work through the partnerships team, which can connect you with the mods and make sure that what you do is welcomed and it's activated in a value add way. And that can be a good way to overcome some of those initial fears. Finally, just always want to listen when platforms talking about where their direction is heading, what kind of product development they're doing, and what they talked about, as I alluded to earlier, further development of the AMA product. I also talked about doing more with video. Not surprising, video continues to be something that every platform wants to see more of, and so that's a good opportunity for teams and leagues again, especially with that more unique video that a Redditor or a Reddit user might not be seeing elsewhere, and enhancing the live event coverage. So if you're like me, we had the moderator or the creator of the RCFB subreddit, college football subreddit, on this podcast. Look back in the archive for that. That was a great conversation. But they go crazy on college football Saturdays. They have threads for each game, and some of those threads or some of those posts rather get enormous engagement, like ridiculous engagement. Sometimes they even have to do one for each half because there's too much on a given game. And so Reddit understands that there's a lot of stuff happening during live events, and they talked about Christine Wickstead, their Reddit partnerships person for sports, talked about how they are continuing to work on enhancing that live event experience, whether it's live stats, polls, custom flair, game highlights. So think about how you can engage that audience during a live game. All right, that is Reddit. Moving on to another panel now. Hope you're still with me. If you're not, again, you can look this up on LinkedIn or summarized on YouTube, ChatGPT, whatever you want to do. But we're going to talk about the OGs who were there. And that was Justin Karp, who of course came up with Pac-12 Network among other places, and was part of the creation of Pac-12 Dark, and has been now NBC Sports, NBC Universal, doing tremendous stuff there, winning awards, overseeing strategies around the Olympics, around Sunday Night Football, just doing great stuff there. He was joined on stage by Julian Valentine, go an OG for sure, back with the Colorado Rockies, and is now at Open Doors in the college athletic space. And then Gavin Rivera, who has been at UFC and now has now been with the Raiders, directing their digital strategy, the Las Vegas Raiders, for years as well. And they talk about what they've learned over the last 10, 15 years being in this unique space of social media and sports. And first off, Justin and really everyone was really about this throughout the conference, not just this panel, but how do you think about value beyond the quote unquote vanity metrics? They're not bad, but the fact is, it was said on stage, likes don't pay the bills. Social media is now expected to help drive forth those business objectives, those business results. So, what are some of the valuable ways? Again, it's not just this panel, but throughout as well and other panels. What are other ways you can demonstrate and create value from social media? So that might mean for Justin and NBC driving tune into their live events, or driving, tune into to Peacock and download subscription for Peacock, especially during the Olympics, I'm sure. And some of the stuff they were doing there was really interesting. It could also mean you're reaching a specific audience, a certain demo that your organization is prioritizing. It might mean that you are really gaining actual insights. You're listening to the comments, you're understanding what's resonating or what the pain points are, and you're able to take that back to your team, and whether it's to inform content strategy or even form, PR and messaging and marketing as well. And recruiting, of course, in the college space is always going to be huge. How are you driving recruitment outcomes? That's always big as well. So again, this all goes database growth is another one, of course, as well. If you're doing contests or sweepstakes and or driving traffic back to a site as well, it's getting messaging out there and getting community relations messaging, brand activation, certainly partnership activation through that sponsorship revenue. So again, think about serving certain content pillars. What you can do beyond the fact that you're just driving likes and comments and whatnot. There's different ways to tell that social media ROI story. And I loved what the way that sort of Gavin, again, of the Raiders, put it as well, is that the best practices today might not be the best practices tomorrow. So you always have to be evolving with the space. Obviously it's changed quite a bit in the last 10 to 15 years. It changes day to day, it seems like, as well. Whether some days one day it might be doing a really short video. Another day might be really, really long video. Another day might be doing something really raw and unpolished. And then the exact opposite, or maybe photos are really hitting, or carousels, or maybe videos falling out of favor, whatever it might be. You always have to be a student of the space, be studying it, enjoy the study of it, and because it's ever evolving. So you have to really watch out for what's changing. The story is the front and center thing that's going to drive everything. As mediums change, as platforms evolve, as packaging evolves as well, which is all that important to keep in mind. But you have to start with a strong story, and that was something that really everyone on stage agreed with throughout, again, this panel, but the conference as well. Is if you don't have a good story to tell, you're kind of you're screwed from the beginning a little bit. And so regardless of all the conversations we have about the right way to package, the right way to present, the right platforms to do things on, it doesn't mean that the story is going to look the same on every platform. You do want to be mindful about what the right way is to package something based on how fans or users or consumers like to engage on that platform. But again, the story is central. And another one too, which again I love, came up in multiple panels as well, is understand the why behind your decision making. So when you are, and that comes to might be putting together formal guidelines. It might be having a brand book or brand guidelines. But the fact is that you should be able to explain to your higher ups, or to your colleagues and to your direct reports as well. Here is why this copy looks this way. Here's why this creative looks this way. Here's why we're doing this on this platform. This is where our strategy comes from. It's not just willy-nilly, I'm going to make decisions day to day. There's a reason behind everything, and it ladders back up to, again, the business goals, the brand, the messaging you want out there, the personality you want to have. It all, there's a reason for all of it. So understand that why. It's going to make conversations more effective and more helpful as well when you start to talk to your higher ups, and as you gain more senior leadership, as these gentlemen on the stage did as well throughout their career, is moving up and taking things more seriously, and being able to understand the greater strategy behind all these micro decisions and posts that come out every day. Okay, that is the what I want to go through. There's a little bit more in my write-up, but that is about the OGs. Now I want to talk a little about the lessons from losing teams. It wasn't exactly called that, but the fact is, there were social media leaders from the Carolina Panthers on stage who, of course, are looking better these days, but had a bit of a rough run there, which resulted in them having the first overall pick and getting Bryce Young. The Charlotte Hornets, who have had their struggles as well, but have had fun also and have had success on social. Diana Smith was there for them. Alex Grant for the Carolina Panthers. And then lastly, my buddy with the White Sox, Tim Brogdon. Of course, everyone knows the Chicago White Sox are coming off a year where they lost a record number of games. Looking more competitive this year so far, so that's helpful. But it's really interesting to be able to hear all these folks talk about what it's like being when your team is not performing up to standard, and you get a lot of vitriol from fans, and that is something that again it can certainly affect you from a personal standpoint, but you can't really let it get you down with some of the feedback there. It has nothing to do with the content quality that you're putting out there. Fans are pissed, and as we always say, it's better to have fans that are loud and angry than silence than apathy. But what you can do, I mean, you read the comments because you might find some stuff in there that is interesting, and this goes in general, not just fans, being pissed about another loss in the column or whatever, but in general, when you're putting out feature stories, when you're putting out day-to-day content. How can you find things that are actionable, that are insightful, that you can then take back and inform the next piece of content you create? You're not gonna change things overnight or change things too dramatically because of a couple of fans. But when you start to recognize patterns or things that are adding up, or things that are across the platforms, and there's similar things that are coming up, that's when you want to maybe ask that question and say, okay, this is something we should pay attention to. Again, it's not you're not going to take trade ideas to up to the team operations, of course, but things that can affect your day-to-day strategy or the fan experience at your venue, whatever it be. That is another way you can create value, drive value, and why it's important to sift through all that vitriol sometimes and make sure that you are understanding what the potential feedback could be telling you as well. It also means that just because the team is losing, you don't want to just stop posting. It's going to be tougher. You're going to get that negative feedback. And sometimes your higher ups, your owners even might say, stop doing this. We don't want fans to be MFing us every time we post, and so let's just not post. But the fact is, as these folks on stage can show you and demonstrate it, you can still have success even when the team is losing, which we'll get into that in a moment. But it also means that if you want to be able to accomplish those preseason goals, we hope to hit this level of engagement. We hope to hit this level of reach and impressions, and this level of audience, this volume of audience. That means that you can't just go silent. Or if you're trying to convince the higher ups and bosses and PR, whoever it might be, why it's still important to post. It's like, hey, if you want us to reach these preseason goals, then let's post through it and find other ways to engage our audience in a positive manner. If you don't, then that means we're gonna end up at the bottom of the rankings for social media growth, and we're not gonna hit our goals. So you lay it out there, and then you come up with a solution, of course, as well. And that might mean leaning into things that your fans are excited about. What gets them to be positive? And again, you're not going to get 100% positivity no matter what you do. You can post puppies and endless charitable donations, and fans are still going to be pissed if the team's not winning. But there are things, and it might be really rallying around the offseason and being able to prioritize those things that fans will get excited about. That might mean, and the Hornets talk about this, Panthers talk about this. It might mean you go all in on the schedule release. Like, of course, this is very popular in the NFL and increasingly popular across other sports as well. Maybe you go all in free agency. You go big on the draft. You go big on certain young players and leverage their personality or some of the fun they can have behind the scenes, and some of that stuff as well. So when there are things that your fans are excited about, reprioritize a little bit or allocate resources to make sure that you make the most of those times when the fans are pleased or are happy. So that can be certainly something to take to heart there as well. Also, when you are posting content, again, we talked about how anything you post at all sometimes will drive that vitriolic behavior and might not drive a lot of traditional engagement as well. But there are other clues you can look to as well to see, okay, fans are pissed. They don't want to hear from us necessarily. But we're posting this content, and there are still ways to understand this content is good. You're showing a whatever, some behind the scenes stuff or some feature story or some community element as well. Are fans watching it, even if they're not commenting on or clicking that like button because it's hard for them to like anything at that time? Are they still watching a lot? So completion rates. Are they sending it? Are sends and shares looking up as well? Is reach going up even if engagement is not up? So there are other ways to see, okay, the content is still driving some actions that we value, even if it's not getting the same level of engagement that we would be getting if we were winning. That said, as well, is have a plan for win. Everyone I talk to, and whether a team is losing or winning, they always seem to have a plan for, okay, we know what we're going to do when we start winning. And so that might mean holding back some ideas. It might mean being ready for so you are ready when the time is right, and you can really I think the quote was from Diana Smith with the Hornets. Some ideas are worth waiting for. And so don't necessarily waste quote unquote a good idea when the team is losing. There might or whether maybe it doesn't feel right to do that idea then. Some ideas are worth waiting for, and you can whip it out when the time is right. This is also an important time to understand what your voice is, what your brand is, and how you want to maintain, be able to work within that so you can do what you can when the team is losing. But I loved hearing Tim Brogdon again from the White Sox talked about having a fan persona and how that helps guide their content decisions, how that helps guide some of the voice and tone they use, and just the decision making overall. And he also talked about coaching up. All of them did about again thinking about still want to be able to drive some results for our organization, but also as Tim talked about a little bit of talking to the team operations around, hey, everyone is pissed about the team right now. We want to help drive the narrative away from people being pissed about the players and the record and whatnot, and we can do that. And here's how. We saw the White Sox last year start to lean in a little bit more with the memes when they started losing, and that did. And people all of a sudden were kind of having some fun with the White Sox on social media, both their fans and certainly not their fans as well. And they were driving some really big results and really big engagement, and it helped kind of shift the conversation about it, shift the narrative a little bit. So I thought that was a really interesting example and a way to when you are talking to those higher ups about here's some value we can produce right now that can get the all the vibes to be solely negative and fans not really wanting to hear anything at all to shifting that narrative a little bit as well. All right, that is what I wanted to go through. There's again a little bit more that I'm leaving off, but we have to keep this conversation moving because we got a little bit more ways to go here, about halfway through. We want to talk next about the live coverage and content panel that my employer Greenfly was the moderator and kind of the key sponsor of, but they had some really impressive people on stage from NASCAR, Alejandro Alvarez, Major League Baseball. They had Brett Blue Weiss and the PWHL, Jane Busman Wise. Just people who oversee social content, and Jane Busman Wise's case, there's a lot of things for the PWHL with growth and brand and marketing and whatnot. But to get into a little bit, MLB, they have an incredible live content capture program, LC program. They do use Greenfly to run it, of course. And Brett on stage talked about the goal being field to feed in 2 minutes. When they have something exciting happening on, and they really have this down to a well-oiled machine, a great operation where they get three angles, right away from their content captures or and broadcasts, ready to go for social media, and they get it as quickly as they can so they can post that on social and maximize the level of engagement. And again, that interesting point earlier about unique content, sharing content only you have, because everyone's gonna get that broadcast clip pretty quickly. And just in general, anyone can clip a broadcast that's live, and a lot of media outlets do themselves, or at least are posting, reposting other people that are posting their broadcast highlight. But as a league, as a team, what content can only you have that really makes it super unique and drives that, maximize that engagement? So that's a really interesting point as well. Is how can your content look different so that all of a sudden it's a thumb stopper and it gets fans to pay attention and consume and prioritize your content as much as they do any nameless feed that posts the highlight. So and another one too was thinking about how you cover a given live event. I thought it was interesting to hear the perspective of NASCAR, Alejandro Alvarez their speedways, their tracks are just enormous. You see some of the comparisons that you can like fit a college football stadium and a couple of them inside a track, if not more. And so they can't be everywhere, and there's going to be things that they might miss. They can have an army of content creators on site for a given race, but they're still going to end up missing something. And so how can you make sure that you are capturing everything you can as much as you can? Part of that is having a little bit of more of a plan, being intentional, and understanding, okay, we want to make sure that we get this going into an event, and also making sure that you have some creators who understanding the creators who are relatively new that might not be as well seasoned as someone who's been capturing races for 5, 6, 7 years. Someone who might be relatively new and might not know where to go, where to be, and coaching them appropriately. The person who knows their way around and is really well ingrained in NASCAR, you might give them a little more agency and also give them maybe the harder stuff, the deeper stuff, and understanding how you can help the others as well, kind of get up to speed on that thing. I thought an interesting angle also was there was actually a question asked about this from the audience around the sort of phone captured content. There are some content creators, some shooters who have leaned all the way in and they're like, hell yeah, I'm gonna mount my phone on top of my DSLR and top of my camera, and we're gonna capture both. Some stuff, the phone stuff looks great for some people. Others are like, I don't know. That phone contest doesn't look as good. It's not as polished. Let me use my camera. But both Blue Rice and Alvarez, again from MLB and NASCAR, said that the data kind of shows that phone capture content does better. It doesn't mean you completely abandon it. You don't need to stigmatize phone capture content. Also recognize there are moments that the phone capture content is going to be better, and there are moments when it's not going to be better. And so understand, when you have the ability to make that choice, then make that choice. Otherwise, you can always try to capture both, or as Alejandro Alvarez from NASCAR said, the best camera is the one in your hand. These things are happen quickly, so shoot what you can and get it out there. But that phone capture content continues to be something that, again, performs well. And I think someone on stage said that it really is more relatable because it feels like it's coming from a friend. It feels like you're there. Whereas some of the other stuff might feel a little more, again, standoffish or polished. But again, there are cases when the phone capture content works better, and there are cases when when the other one may, but don't sweat it overall. All right, lots more on that one, but I want to go to this next discussion about design and social media. I love seeing on stage there were folks from the Falcons, Jack Osmer, who does graphic design for them, alongside Ryan Delgado, who oversees social media for them, and folks from University of Tennessee Athletics as well, Kellen Heiser, who's their social media guy, and Evan Ford, who is on the design team, creative team. And these teams work so closely together and really rise and fall with each other. Great creative elevates social media. Great social media strategy helps the creative team accomplish what they can, achieve the best. And so how do these teams work together, and what does success look like? And there were some great conversations, insights coming out here. First off, the fact that what the value of creative is. These creative looks, as well as even just the techniques, are ownable. I loved Ryan Delgado, who's director of social media influencers for the Falcons, talked about how that overhead view from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium dome, that looking down at the field, that's kind of something that is something they almost own. When you see that angle, it's Falcons. And yes, others have riffed on it, but it's really cool how something that the creative team can birth and the production team can really create something that a team can own. And that just goes with, in general, when you have a distinct look or distinct brand, that really amplifies and augments the brand equity and brand value so much. And so, don't sleep on how valuable creative can be. Now, there's especially nowadays, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when it comes to creative, especially in the college space. So it's interesting to hear the perspective from Evan Ford, who's on the creative side for the University of Tennessee Athletics, the Volunteers. There are tons of teams all kind of doing their own thing to some degree, but how can you make sure that there's some brand consistency while also allowing them a little bit of flexibility too? This is the softball team. I look different from the track and field team, whatever it might be. And so it's about establishing those guardrails and having something where you give them a bit of a sandbox they can play in, but in a safe way, so that the overall brand of the University of Tennessee is still recognizable, but each team, and it goes for, again, social media managers on a pro team as well, might be using something that the creative team or graphic design team cooked up. And so making sure that some layers might be locked, but other things where you can play around with it, and understanding that might be through both creative and brand guidelines. This is what this is why we have everything how it is and how you can play within it. And then having that again, that sandbox to be able to play within as well. Just understanding why things are the way they are is super important as well. I thought that was a great insight coming out of this. Was whether it's a brand guide or guidelines, or this is why we made the decision. This is why this texture looks like this. This is why we went with this font. This is why we like this color. This is why we don't do this. And when you have that stuff documented and everyone kind of understands it and can learn from it, that's super valuable, and it makes those working outside the guardrails a little bit. Why you can understand why you don't do that, and why it's important to have that stuff in there, and why it all matters. There's a method to the madness, so to speak, and the more everyone understands that, that makes creative briefs and requests more effective. It makes playing in that sandbox more effective as well. It's something that comes up quite a bit in just social media content and creative in general is that it's easy to get monotonous with this stuff. Baseball, 162 games, you have the same routine every day, and that's good for athletes. They like routines, but it's not as good for social media teams where fans can get bored with the same way to see on-field warm-ups before an NFL game, or batting practice before a baseball game, or pre morning skate for a hockey team, or warm-ups. So how can you not get too monotonous and keep it somewhat fresh? And that might mean make it a small tweak here or there with this is our starting line graphic, but we're going to change the order in which you put it in the carousel. We're going to change the font a little bit, or change the angle type of photo that we have. Maybe when you're posting on Reels or carousels on Instagram, change the cover a little bit, or change the angle at which something's being captured. Change the composition on creative. So again, you don't want to completely blow things up every day, but there are opportunities to make things feel fresh, even amidst the long season, and avoid that potential monotony. Game days, of course, move very rapidly once you're in the moment, and so I liked hearing about how they sort of prepare for battle, so to speak. That might mean making sure that templates are prepared as much as they can. Sometimes you won't have a creative resource with you. Sometimes you will. Sometimes it's the press box where you have a social media manager, someone on the keys, who's right next to the creative person who is making graphics or updating templates or updating things in the moment. Sometimes you won't. So how can you prepare for those scenarios? And scenario planning in general, knowing, okay, there's a chance that this milestone could happen during a game, or what do we do if this happens during a game? Talking through that, understanding how we're going to execute makes that crazy game day feel a little less crazy and not necessarily predictable, but you're able to pivot and react in the moment as well. Making sure that you are communicating with your creative team, not just on what you want, but why you want, and also the performance of it as well. Don't leave the creative team in the dark. When something goes out there, if it performs well, when it gets used, let the creative team know, and it would celebrate the wins, of course. If something performs less than expectation, let the creative team know. Here's how it performed. Here's why we think it performed the way it did. If something doesn't get used, certainly let the creative team know, because that can be tough. Sometimes there's a reason for that. So close that loop overall on performance, on feedback. The back and forth, honest nature of the relationships is so important that everyone has feedback. Hey, the brief you gave me was not detailed enough. Here's what I need to see next time. Hey, that creative you gave me didn't work. Here's a better timeline for something. That also came up as well, as being able to create better briefs, create better requests. That should be an ever evolving but an ever improving process. The more you understand how long things take, the more you understand how to communicate feedback, how to communicate asks. That's super important as well. And then finally, I liked Jack Osborne from the Falcons talking about the power of creating a team identity that's consistent across voice and visual. That is really the crux of this conversation. Is the value of that is invaluable when things seem to match the voice and the visual. So that's why it's so important for these two sides, the creative and design and social, to have that great relationship. Next, I want to touch briefly on TikTok. TikTok was there last year as well at Gondola. This year they had Kenny Jansen, who was there, who oversees their sports broadcast partnerships, and they also talked. It was a lot of general insights, but it's framed a bit around creators and March Madness as well. Louise Chenard, senior producer of field content for Bleacher Report, was on stage as well. She offered a ton of good insight. And they also had Trey Fills, who is a content creator, former athlete, former Yale basketball player, also played professional basketball, now is a full-time content creator. So they offered a lot of insights around TikTok in general. So first off, from Kenny, the TikTok sports partnerships lead, he talked about how they activated during March Madness, showcasing their tournament hub. And really the insight here, I think, was that TikTok knows they are a powerful search platform. That a lot of users use them for search. And so how can you think about how your brand shows up in search and how TikTok sort of took advantage of that search and made sure that they were welcoming users with a hub in this case and a way to discover all this content around things that they were searching for with intent. And so, I would say for that, search your team, search your brand, search your athletes, search your sponsors. What can you find? There's a lot of potential value there about how TikTok is currently serving up searches because again, search is kind of a priority for them. I loved hearing from Bleacher Report about their approach to TikTok and really talking about as a place of experimentation. TikTok is a place where good ideas will hit if they're good, if there's value to them. Sometimes it might be the second or third time post as well. If you can just make a few tweaks here or there. And I liked also how she talked about again. First off, just experimenting in general because you never know what can hit some of these really rabbit holes of niches and interests. But especially during those big times, during a March Madness tournament, she said flood the feed was kind of their approach. There's no such thing as posting too much. The right content will find the right audience, and during those high times, people are really interested in what's going on and what's relevant in pop culture. So flood that feed. Don't be afraid. Which goes along with a piece of advice from Trey Phillips, the creator, former athlete. Don't be afraid to flop. To get better at this stuff, you need reps. You just have to post. One of the kind of cool parts about TikTok is that your bad content won't really get seen by that many people. It just won't get served that much because it's not good. And so don't be afraid about saving face or whatever. Because the way TikTok works is it shows good content to more people and content that performs well, it builds upon itself. So don't be afraid to take chances. If the worst case scenario, something doesn't get seen by too many people, okay, you learn from it. You take that learning and apply it to something else. Maybe tweak something if you feel strongly, and maybe it'll work better the next time. Also, a couple more things. When Bleacher Report works with the creators, really understand how your creator produces content. Don't just look at, oh, it's the right audience, it's the right, they have a lot of followers, they get a lot of good engagement. What does their content look like and how they typically create content? And does that align with kind of what you have in mind? Does their voice and tone kind of have align with what you have in mind as well? The worst thing you can do is change the way a creator creates because that's not going to be what their audience is expecting, and it's not going to be something that they're going to be too fluent in necessarily or comfortable with. And so when you're doing creator research, think about what that final product's going to look like, and if it aligns with kind of what you hope to see and what you have in mind as well. Lastly, it goes without saying perhaps, but leaning into some of that the earlier themes around interest-driven stuff on TikTok, and there's an interest segment seemingly for everything. So don't be afraid to kind of go into that non-sports stuff, or at least sports or sports adjacent stuff, whatever it might be. I love the example from Bleacher Report. She talked about how they interviewed Steven Nudorosek, basically the pommel horse, the bespectacled pommel horse hero for the Team USA Olympic men's gymnastics team at the Olympics. If you know pommel horse guy, the guy with the glasses, just really took the culture by storm and did a great job in helping the team medal. But they interviewed him, and the subject of Rocket League came up, the video game, and his love for it. All of a sudden, that post took off on TikTok because it reached a bunch of Rocket League fans. And so lean into those kind of more niche areas or interest areas, even if it's not directly related to sports in this case. It was, the video game Rocket League. So love that example. And again, like we talked about a little bit with Reddit earlier as well, is find those things that have an interest-based segment, search it on TikTok, discover things from your feed as well, and think about how your brand or your team or your organization can kind of fit into there. I want to touch briefly on the women's sports conversation. Of course, there was going to be a discussion about women's sports. Continues to grow. The athletes are incredible on social and on the court and on the field as well. And so about the women's sports conversation, there was folks from Together, which I'm a big fan of as a media platform covering women's sports, and there was some creators as well. Just a great discussion. One thing that came up was this motifal, but this trend of athlete collabs. That might mean teammates on a women's sports team. It might mean a men's player and a women's player collabing together as well. The fact that sometimes it's the female athlete that has a bigger audience, and the male is kind of going on the coattails, or the teammate is, or whatever it might be, or vice versa. The fact is there's a lot of mutual value to be gained, and fans like seeing this kind of interaction, whether it's the Minnesota Timberwolves and Minnesota Lynx athletes doing something together, or across sports, or whatever it might be. Again, with teammates, that athletes are starting to understand, and their management teams perhaps as well, that the collab tool is pretty darn valuable. And as more teams and leagues use it, of course, with frequency and sponsors, there's no reason athletes can't do it as well with their team, but also with each other, and they can take advantage of that superpower and continue to grow their platform and in turn help their partners, help their brand, help their team as well. Also, of course, the growth room in sports is continuing to help welcome in new brands into the sports marketing and sports activation space, sports sponsorship space. Whether it's beauty brands or feminine hygiene brands. Women athletes are also participating in this type of content that is amenable to those kind of brand activations. Whether it's a cosmetic brand that's activating with a get ready with me, or talking about mental health, or talking about feminine hygiene brands, whatever it might be. Women are generally seeing, this was said on stage, so I'm not speaking out of turn a little bit, but the hypothesis is that women are more willing to be vulnerable on social media than the average male, which makes them more relatable to fans and therefore more effective and authentic brand ambassadors. So that's something to just watch in general as a great trend, and something that frankly male athletes can learn from as well. There's also this tangible shift in the way that brands are participating with women's sports and media for that matter too. It used to come off as patronizing or like an act of charity, like they were supporting women's sports. Look at us. But it's now on a pedestal, a platform that is as strong and powerful as any men's sports. And it's not just, hey, look at us supporting women. It's look at these awesome superstar athletes and the cool stuff they're doing on the court and these are on the field, wherever it might be. And really appreciating them for the cultural superstars they are and also the really impressive athletes that they are. Finally, the sort of really interesting way of talking about the fans of women's sports are tend to be diehard fans. I don't have any data behind this, and they didn't talk about it on stage with data. But I would wager that your average fan of a women's athlete or women's team has more avidity, is a more passionate fan than the average fan of a men's team or a male athlete. Women's sports fans tend to be bigger fans, and they can even be a little bit tribal and passionate in that sense, that community. So all that to say that when you do something like honor a women's athlete or women's team at a big men's competition or at a cultural event or a brand activation, whatever it be, those women's sports fans will kind of carry on with you. It's hey, oh crap, let's see Chelsea Gray out of this NBA game, or let's check out Cameron Brink at this MLB game. Those fans will travel. So just another way to take advantage of the growth of women's sports and further activate that, and rising tide raising all boats there. All right, coming down to the wire here. Hope you're still with me. If not, again, I appreciate you you reading the summary or whatever it might be. And this panel I want to talk about was about kind of it was called Be Everywhere, so it's a little about distribution, but also just activating and community building with fans. And then there was folks from All City Network, which is this sort of local based sports media network. So they have the Denver DVNR, they have Phoenix PHNX. You might be familiar with some of those brands. We also had Mikey Kaufman, who oversees social media strategy for Overtime. Very impressive there. And Joey Mestas, my buddy, who is with Sports Illustrated, with Team USA, among other places, and now is with Microsoft helping to market their Copilot product and working with creators along the way. And a few insights here. All City, Parker Sperry, who's their VP of Partnership Marketing, talked about how for their localized media companies, again, DNVR, PHNX, PLY, I think for Philly, DLS for Dallas, they have a handful of these that are continuing to grow as well. They talk about how they serve fans throughout the game day journey. So we think about this as well from we talk about driveway to driveway in sports, and you think about it similarly from a content consumption or fan engagement perspective. What does the morning of a game look like? What does pregame look like? What does in-game look like? What does postgame look like? And how are you serving fans during each of those windows and however it might be? Sperry, again, from the guy from All City. I'll talk about how they position their talent to be brand ambassadors, something that certainly we can learn from in the pro sports team or league side as well, or whatever kind of brand you're within the sports world. And when you have talent, they are representing your brand. So how can you empower them? It's not necessarily always about the growth of the owned brand channels. The more that your talent is able to grow their platforms, the more they're able to be ambassadors for your platform. So something that, again, you can think about that in a lot of ways, but that anyone can really take advantage of no matter where they are. I really loved the way that Overtime's Mikey Coffin talked about talking to the communities and listening to the athletes that play with Overtime Elite, the athletes that they shoot in their content, and their parents as well, and think about how can we serve them. That might mean doing something in the community. It might also mean we have a platform. There are programming gaps to fill. how can Overtime use their platform to fill those programming gaps. So that's something that I think you can really spend some time thinking about that, because it applies in a broad way to anyone with a platform, that there are opportunities to really serve these communities. And again, that programming gap I thought was a really, really good way to put it. Lastly, I want to touch on Joey, who again works with a lot of influencers and creators as he markets Copilot, and he talked about when it comes to thinking about an activation or thinking about a creator to work with, what use cases would the audience care, would our audience care about, and that can really guide a lot of decision making when it comes to creators and activations. Will my audience care, and why? Just keep that front of mind. I won't ramble on too much more about that, but that goes into content, goes into activations, goes into creators you work with, and just a lot of good insights there. All right, a couple of the throwaways, not throwaways, but to finish off here, Meta was there, of course, and this year they talked a lot about Instagram and AI, and of course Threads. On Instagram, I want to touch briefly there. I recommend checking out my write-up, but they talked about utilizing the feed for curated highlights, stories for ephemeral moments, nothing too crazy there. Short and entertainment focused videos for reels. Again, entertainment focus, I think is really interesting there to keep in mind. Go live, but when you go live, be interactive. Don't just go live just to go live. How are you using the fact that you're live and can interact with fans back and forth? And then of course the last piece. So again, we touched on feed, stories, reels, live, and then channels. Broadcast channels that are still continuing to grow and evolve with Instagram. But the way that Kristen O, who was there from Meta, talked about it was, or put it on her slide as well, was using that to engage with core fans. That might mean core fans around in general. It might mean for specific events. It might be for athletes, for sub brands. So that's a way to think about channels. And then of course, Threads was a big one there as well. Continues to get big numbers. Whether you're on Threads or not, the numbers don't lie. There's a lot of users and fans who are on there. And here's the way that Meta talked about it. One, post authoritative content. Content that really you own and is true to you. So that might mean highlights. It also might mean behind the scenes. Another point was own the moment. So that is, sharing content that makes a statement or echoes what fans are feeling. Threads is a place where they want to encourage conversations. And so when fans are feeling a certain way, lean into that and post that sort of owning the moment content. Creators and commentators. So develop those brand ambassadors, elevate community voices, and help these others who are speaking already about you and on your behalf. How can you amplify that as well? And that also went along with the fourth thing that you wanted to talk about was community engagement. So empower everyday fans. Big opportunity to grow on Threads with that mindset. Lastly, what I'll leave you with here, I like something that David Brickley said. He's the head of STN Digital, founder, CEO, the agency that is just full of rock stars and all stars in the social media, sports, content, strategy, digital space. And he said, your network is your net worth. Now, we've all heard that before, but as people continue to grow in their career, really having that trusted Rolodex, that trusted roster of people that you can go to for not just advice, obviously, but hey, we want to do this big campaign. I'm now in the C-suite. I'm talking to the owner. I'm talking to the CMO, whatever it might be, or I am in the C-suite as the chief digital officer, whatever it may be. And we want to pull off something big. Do you have the agency you can call? Do you have the freelancers that you can call that are vetted, that you trust, that can help you bring a big idea to life? So building that network is super valuable as you continue to grow in the space. And let's apply that more broadly, I guess, as well, because it was at this conference where we are building our network. We are having great conversations. We're learning from each other. We're growing with each other. We're understanding who we can call when we have a question or want to talk through ideas or continue to develop our career and understanding. I can't really just say enough good stuff about this conference. All the people there, all the conversations I had, the great chats, the great sidebars, learning so much. Again, the panels were awesome as well. Thank you to Jared and Nick and David Herman, the whole Gondola and Fresh Tape team for putting together this event. To Greenfly, of course, for sending me. I will not be there without Greenfly, and I hope you check out Greenfly as well. But I hope you enjoy this different riff on the social media, digital social media sports podcast. We will be back with a new episode with an interview before you know it. But until next time, you can find me on Twitter, NJ287. I'm your host, Neil Horwitz. On LinkedIn, you can look me up as well. The website, dsmsports.net. And the podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Until next time, this is Neil Horwitz signing off from the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.